Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Friday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We are doing the show kind of split screen today. We're at Casa de Schmidt. I'm in the living room. Elijah, my wife, is putting together new tables, and she has threatened me with screwdrivers, not the kind you drink. There's a large piece of glass. She is wondering if she can bust over my head. It's a pleasant Friday. How are you?
Good. Like IKEA-style tables? Like, did they come online and she's now assembling them, or she's like building these from scratch?
No, she's absolutely assembling these things. And they look like high-end patio furniture that I'm sure will be quite expensive when the bill comes. They look cool. They're more of a silver tint, because we need more things we can't put drinks or coasters on. So it looks all right here. I'll have to send you a picture.
That'd be good. Is your son already on the Call of Duty action? I know school ended, like an hour ago?
Yes, he just took the dogs downstairs. They were out back screaming because our neighborhood loves our pets. And, yeah, that's what's up. We are loaded up today. We'll talk a little hoops with Derek Peterson, Dr. Petey. Going to join us. We'll get some thoughts from him as spring ball's around the corner. Pride of Fairbury is Bill Doleman, as Billy D going to be with us in 1 hour. And then we'll hit some state wrestling and also get some thoughts on in-state recruiting from in central Nebraska from our friend Doug Duda with ESPN 1460 and 1550 Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island. You're also hearing us on Crystal Clear FM out of Kearney, 92.1 FM, and Hastings, 92.7. So that is really cool to announce. Dude has been covering state wrestling all week, and maybe a bit of a preview with some state tournament action. Numbers to get in, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Email chris@hailvarsity.com. Give us a follow on Twitter at Schmidt_radio for Chris Schmidt, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And, yes, we will talk some Husker hoops as Purdue comes to town tomorrow. Locally on the air, we will have Wahoo and Norris around 7:20 tonight. That's part of the reason I'm closer to Norris than I am Wahoo, doing the show from home. So, Elijah, I got to ask you, you graduated high school, what was it, 17, 18?
2017, yeah, so we're 4 years ago now.
Yep, 4 years ago. And one of the big in-state gets or targets for Nebraska football was Williams out of Lincoln Southeast. He ended up going to Wisconsin. This is Donovan's older brother on the gridiron, and that's like one that got away right when Frost and Rude and this staff showed up. We're going to spend this first segment diving into in-state recruiting, the Nebraska reception to some pretty high-level kids, and ultimately a big-time decision tomorrow for a top 5 with Devin Jackson out of Omaha Burke, really high-level linebacker, Deshaun Woods out of Omaha Central, really talented offensive lineman. Both those guys are best friends. They go to different schools. They're going to make their announcement tomorrow, and I don't know that Nebraska is going to be in there, a top 5 even, but you're pretty close to Williams. Bryson was a kid that really kind of popped off film for a lot of people who check in on recruiting, but specifically with the size and speed and footwork ability. And he's a guy continuing to grind at Wisconsin. You kind of live this with your vicinity to to Bryson and just growing up in that Southeast program where coaches have been known to check in. It's just a different world, and you're closer to it, Elijah, with just what kids feel and think about Husker football. There are some that still grow up wanting to play for Nebraska, or they have another connection, be it a dad or a brother, or they just like Nebraska. But it has waned. The in-state popularity for the Red N hasn't gone away, but it's waned. And now Nebraska's like everybody else, where they got to scratch and claw and fight to keep their own kids. And Nebraska's grown with the amount of training that's gone on, Warren Academy, for example, where you get kids that are starting to get groomed from 8th grade through 10th grade, where they're putting the work in with the weight training and the 7-on-7 stuff. There's so many high-level kids that are in the state of Nebraska working day in, day out to perfect their craft and skills. Everyone's got huddle access. Boom. There's no secrets anymore in the state of Nebraska, be it in Columbus, be it in Omaha, be it in Lincoln Southeast, be it in Kearney, Nebraska with Hoiberg. There are eyes everywhere, and there are programs from everywhere that have come in the last 3 to 5 years and tried to poach. It's a unique problem that Nebraska didn't face for a long time, and now it's a dogfight with this pandemic and with a restriction that's been carried out through the end of May for this upcoming class. Am I wrong with any of these takes that Nebraska is just another school, not the school anymore to in-state kids?
Well, I mean, what kids nowadays are thinking from 2-star to 5-stars, all of them think, I'm just looking for a place that's going to get me to the NFL. All these guys are wanting to get to the NFL. When you take a step back, if you didn't grow up as a Nebraska fan, when you just objectively look at the results over the past 5 years, does Nebraska look like the school that's going to get you to the NFL?
No.
I mean, not one bit.
Not at all.
Not one bit. When there's other schools coming in that can say, yeah, we had 3 first-round picks last year. The year before that, we had 2 first-round picks. Even if their record is 8-4, 9-3, it doesn't matter because its next step is NFL. Whereas Nebraska's coming in, 5-7 with not a single first-round draft pick. They didn't have a single guy picked until day 3 of the draft. And you're looking at that and you're going, is this really the school that's gonna get me success? I know my friends and my family are close to here and they want to see me, but beyond all, these guys want to get their shot in the NFL. And is Nebraska that place right now?
It's not that it can't be, it just hasn't been. I think that's the best way I will put it. You can get to the NFL anywhere. I mean, look at the number of North Dakota State draft picks, right? You're going to have another North Dakota State kid go in the first round of the NFL draft here coming up. And I'm not laughing at or scoffing at that. I'm just saying 15 years ago, you knew North Dakota State was a good football program, but now they're cranking out NFL quarterbacks. And with Nebraska, they have not put people into the league. They just haven't. They did in the 2015 draft, and then it's kind of been shut off. You have both the Davis twins. You have Daniels from last year. But for the most part, no, you've had a massive drought. Even with Rex, right? I mean, Nebraska was barely saved. When Tanner got, I think, drafted in the 6th or 7th round by Jacksonville in the 2017 season. So Nebraska has had its showcase where you have a guy like Sue and Levante that are Nebraska dudes in the Super Bowl. It's been a long, long time ago. It's been a long time since Prince Amukamara went in the first round. It's been a long time since Roger Craig and Tom Rathman were killing people on Super Bowl Sunday in back-to-back years. Nebraska can get there. And Scott Frost has a number of his Central Florida kids from that undefeated season that are still in the league, okay? But Nebraska, the last 5 years, it's not that they haven't put NFL guys in. They have, but it's not been in droves. And the last really good season they had was 2014, 2015, when you look at the combination of kids like 3 guys going on the defensive side of the ball with Randy and Malik, Malik went a year later along with Vincent, forgive me, but that same class, so to speak. And you had Amir and Gregory in that second round. So it's really kind of up to Nebraska to start winning. It's up to Nebraska to be able to win over in-state kids and go see them. They can't do that right now. But I guess I'm not panicked that for future kids, Nebraska can't right the ship. They can do it on the field, and I think they can do it from a relationship standpoint. And Nebraska still did a good job of undoing the ignorance that went on in the Metro with the previous staff. And they got a Henrich, they got a Hickman. They were able to get the in-state kids. They didn't get a Bryson Williams, but they tried. They tried and tried and tried. And then you fast forward here, Nebraska's done okay with in-state kids, but you're not going to like what you hear tomorrow with Devin Jackson or Deshaun Woods and their top five. I'm thinking it's A&M. I'm thinking it's Arizona State. I'm thinking it's Miami. I don't think Nebraska's on the radar. Now, Elijah, kids can't still visit. You won't know until after May 31st where and if you can go on official visits or not. If for some insane reason kids can't go check things out, the sight unseen commitment could happen. Maybe you'll have a situation where a kid on his own dime, like Avante Dickerson, will go out to Eugene. But just down the road, it's a lot quicker and easier to go check things out for yourself in Lincoln. That's just down the road versus driving to Tempe or going to Coral Gables or hitting College Station. Not that they wouldn't or couldn't or can't, but Nebraska, the answer is not going to be good. I don't think Nebraska will give up on Jackson and Woods. But really, there's really a pretty high level of top five, Elijah, that are in here. You've got Houseman out of Columbus. You've got Helms at tight end, of course. You've got another kid, Riley Ducker, Micah Riley. Again, you have two Bellevue West tight ends. You've got Houseman of Columbus, and then you got Jackson and Woods. Nebraska may get one out of these five, and predictably people will freak at that closing percentage.
I mean, but just look at I talked about the draft earlier. I'm going to say it again. Just look at how Nebraska's been able to turn around talent. If you can't see campus, you're just going to have to go based on what the coaching staff has done for the guys that have come before you. And Nebraska, since the year 2000, has had 4 first-round picks. That's it. And the last one was in 2011. You mentioned it, Prince Mukamara. It's been a decade. Mm-hmm. It's been a decade since Nebraska had a first-round pick. So if these guys, I mean, they're even close to home, but not being Nebraska fans, when was the last time they heard a Nebraska guy get their name called in the draft, you go walk across the stage and shake Goodell's hand? It's just not happening. There's a whole bunch of other schools which are probably going to be in their top fives, which have had that, though.
Well, and the other part of this is I mentioned Pac-12, I mentioned ACC, I mentioned Big 12. We mentioned warm weather, okay? I mean, that's part of this, too. And Herm Edwards has the NFL appeal. Jimbo Fisher and A&M have had a pretty long history of offensive line success. And then the U is the U. And the U finally was worth a damn for the first time in a long time last year. I still think they went 10-3, but they were in the top 10 for a while. Miami's always got that mystique and reputation, even though they have not been at the U level for 20 years. I mean, the last time the U was great was 2002, and they shortly fell apart after they lost to the Ohio State team in the Fiesta Bowl in that 2002 championship game. But Miami's not been at that level for nearly as long as Nebraska's not been at an elite level. But no, I think things take care of itself in state. If you're Nebraska, if you start winning again, obviously, I think you need to treat these kids like they are in Iowa or Kansas City or Denver, or you got to treat them like they're out of state just because you do not have a history of success recently in the program. Some of it isn't your fault, and some of it you're trying to get turned around. what Nebraska did with the regional 500-mile radius was flat out incredible and insane. They did really well for 2021. They can do it again, but you're going to have yet another high-level crop of kids probably end up looking somewhere else. December's not here yet. Nebraska can do their work, but it really, the approach and the connection is so key. These guys got to be treated like, well, they are commodities, and I know you roll your eyes at that, but in all honesty, you got to treat them like they're out-of-state kids. And I said that before, but I mean it. You can't take them for granted is what I'm at. And even from an attitude standpoint, you can't have the attitude of, well, they should want to come here. It's Nebraska. It's their home state. A lot of these kids have different takes on that, and they don't know or realize the success or the history because it's not been part of their sports life cycle. You think about when you become a fan of a team, that 8 years of age to 15. It isn't real rosy for Nebraska with a lot of these kids that are seniors to be or juniors right now. Elijah Herbel, it's Chris Schmidt. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We'll see where things shake out in recruiting. We'll check in with Derek Peterson from Hail Varsity. Some Husker hoops on our mind. Bill Doleman coming up as well on a Friday.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in, and I feel like it's been way too long. The good doctor is here, Derek Peterson, at Dr. PDHV on Twitter. His podcast, you can find at Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, and it drops Friday mornings. The Varsity Club podcast. We say hi to the pride of Oklahoma. Dr. PD, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I am sitting at the kitchen island. The dogs are quiet. My wife quit putting together her new end tables and coffee table, and the vacuum cleaner's been turned off. So we're having a good segment. We're having a good second segment, Derek. So it's quiet at home, dude.
Good. You got to cherish those moments when you get them.
Right, exactly. So there's been lots of snow and ice in your native Oklahoma and further south in Texas. I ask this lovingly, and I've got some suggestions, but what's your most burnable piece of furniture to stay warm if you had to?
Ooh, most burnable piece of furniture. We've got a futon that is
God, yes.
just not comfortable at all, and that would probably be the one. I feel like that one would burn well. It's big,
okay,
fabric. I feel like that would burn well and keep us warm.
Can we just break the myth? Every kid got a futon for college. We had them too, and I know they kind of fold down so you can just pass out. But God, they're not comfortable. And you just said it for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, you got to spend like $1,000 on one to get one that's comfy, or more. Like, and at that point, just buy yourself a couch. Like, we have a couch in our living room that has a kind of recliner function to it, and it's the comfiest thing ever. Like, my brother came to visit one time, and instead of sleeping on the futon, which he said wasn't comfortable, he just slept on the couch and reclined, so that was more comfortable than the futon. Like, just buy yourself a couch at that point. Just
listen to Derek Peterson here on comfort in the living room. Okay, what's your take here? We were just hitting this to start the show about, you've got a couple of Nebraska's top in-state kids for 2022 that'll have their announcement tomorrow for a top 5. I don't know that Nebraska is going to be in the on the short list. Well, I want your perspective here on what you think Nebraska can do as they build to win consistently in a COVID period right now. to keep connecting. They just did well in state or regionally with kids, but you've got a crew of 2022 kids that may be more of the Avante Dickerson mold of where they want to kind of go out and explore. The blowback won't be good by Nebraska fans because, they'll freak if in-state kids get away. And then also speak to Oklahoma for a moment here. How well does OU and Oklahoma State do with keeping in-state kids in their border? Or it just feels like Oklahoma gets rated quite a bit because of the high level of kid.
Yeah, Oklahoma also gets rated because Oklahoma can afford to go recruit elsewhere. Like they can pull 5 stars out of California, which they've done, or kind of go into the South and recruit, which they've done. And they're able to do that because they're winning. And so I think as the talent in the state here in Nebraska continues to get recognized more and more and continues to be more, I'd say, properly rated, it's going to be difficult for Nebraska, even with a winning program. It's going to be difficult to keep the top kids in state. You're going to get kids like Avante Dickerson has the Oregon offer, right? You're going to get kids that are going to have big time offers, and you saw a kid just this last week here locally that blew up, and the bulk of those offers were Big Ten or Power 5 offers. So it's, that's good. You want that. You want people to look at your state and say there's a lot of talent there. But, for Nebraska, the first step is being a consistently strong program, a program that's going to consistently win and show the hometown kids that you're going to be playing in meaningful games late in the season. Not just exciting games early in the season because it's early in the season. And there hasn't been enough of that lately. So you see a lot of these kids, as we get, further and further away from Nebraska's last conference championship, away from the last time they were nationally relevant, you're going to get kids that never grew up a Nebraska fan. You get kids that, even though they lived here, they never grew up a Nebraska fan. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I wasn't an Oklahoma fan. That's just the way it is. Noah Vedral talked about when he came home, he was an Oregon fan growing up. That's just the way it happens. So Nebraska has to give kids as many reasons to stay home as possible that aren't just, oh, well, you're from here, and we're 30 minutes an hour away. And another thing that is important, and not to make excuses for the program, I have grandparents that live in Bellevue, and I don't get to see them very often. It's not a short drive to go see them, especially, when you have as hectic a life as I'm sure a Division I caliber high school senior has, even in COVID times. It's not easy to just pick up and be on the road for 2 hours to go visit Nebraska, and with everything that's going on, they haven't been able to. So I think that plays a part. But and Greg Smith and I talked about this on my podcast that you referenced earlier. Nebraska signed 5 of the top 7 kids in the state last cycle, in the 2021 cycle, but they missed on 2 of the top 3. And if that continues to happen, in spite of all of the reasons that I just gave you for why it could happen and why it has happened and why it could continue to happen, that can't be a thing. Nebraska needs to find a way to keep top talent in state until it can go pull 4 stars, high 4 stars, 5 stars from elsewhere, where you see other programs that necessarily don't lock down their borders. It's because they're able to go elsewhere and get better kids. And Nebraska's not really doing either right now. But, when it starts winning, if and when those wins start coming, and we're talking about 9-10 win seasons, then it needs to be, all right, you got to get 2 of the top 3. You got to get all 3 of them, really, to feel good. But Nebraska's not there yet. So they got to do work on the field first and then kind of worry about some of that stuff elsewhere.
Derek Peterson's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Derek, when Nebraska's had success, it feels like it's because they lock down these guys within the 500-mile radius, and they also have another state they can turn to go get their talent. I think back to Bo Pelini and his success in Texas. Scott Frost has tried to build that in Florida. Do you think that his expedition down to Florida to get these guys to come to Nebraska, do you think that's been failed, or do you think he's going to continue to try to get some Florida kids in later recruiting classes?
I mean, it's probably hard to say. I mean, a lot of their Florida success was that entire staff was in Florida and had relationships with those coaches that were down there, and the more time they spend away from Florida, those relationships are I'm not going to say decay, but you move away from home and you're not as close of friends with the people back home as you were as time moves on. That's probably going to happen a little bit. I don't think Nebraska's going to abandon Florida, because I don't think you can afford to abandon Florida. And the way that they recruit, it's going to be sort of a national focus, and they're going to try to get those hot spots. I don't think it's been a failure at all. COVID changed things the last year, and we'll probably have a similar effect this year, right? Like, kids left, and then all of a sudden it was like, you know what? I got stuff going on back home. I've got maybe, a family member that's had a health scare or going through some stuff, and you know what? It's just more important to me to be closer to home. And so when you're pulling kids from the edges of the country, from the coast, and bringing them to the middle of the country, hundreds of miles away from home, like that stuff is just going to happen. So I don't think Florida is a failed strategy, and I don't think they'll go away from it. But I do think, you mentioned the 500-mile radius, and Greg Smith has written about this a ton. Like, it was a big emphasis with this last class, and it'll probably continue to be a big emphasis. But part of that too is, like we talked about, the talent in the state is growing. The talent around them is growing. Like, they pulled a kid that should have been a 5-star out of Iowa. So the talent around them is getting better. So, it's probably not going to be what it was like that first class that they were here in 2018. It's probably not going to be to that extent as we move forward. But I think that, Florida will still be a point of emphasis for them.
Derek Peterson's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine, and Dr. PDHV on Twitter is where you follow him. And his podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the Varsity Club. Dr. Petey, I've got 90 seconds. The new issue is out with Hail Varsity. Please tell folks about your feature in there.
Yeah. Wrote about Nicole Caton, who was told to retire when she was at Cal. And she didn't want to. She felt like she could continue playing, and her dad was an advocate for her, and a former Cal team doctor was a big advocate for her, and they found a way to get her right. And she is at Nebraska, and she's played pretty well for them. Once she got cleared, she played pretty well. So she's got a remarkable story. She's a remarkable woman. She's got a lot of determination, and I hope that comes through in the piece. I was really happy to get to talk to her and tell her story, and happy that she shared with me the way that she did, and I hope people like the story.
Well, get the magazine for sure, 8553-Husker, HailVarsity.com/subscribe. Bundle it. You'll love it, digital and in print for sure. And what a storyteller he is. He's very humble, but Derek Peterson's got a great one on Mike Cole, and what a job he did. Dr. Petey, man, we got to get it together for a cocktail and just say what's up. We can wave at each other, and we can nod over the FaceTime thing, or just say hi on the radio waves. But it's been a while, man. Hope you and the fam are well, and thanks for jumping on today.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. We'll do it soon.
All right, man. There he is. Derek Peterson, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Good discussion. We'll switch gears, hit some Nebraska basketball. The mayor back in Lincoln, which is good. Purdue on the way in. Basketball weekend. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. A Friday edition, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Thanks to Derek Peterson from Hail Varsity. Bill Doleman's coming up in 20 minutes or so. Doug Duda from the Doug and Daddy Show will check in. He was all over state wrestling this week, and some prep ball from him in the second hour. Numbers to get in, 466-3776. 466-3776, 800-825-5865. You as a Nebraska fan, how well will you take Nebraska losing in-state kids to other big-time programs? Is it something that you just got to accept at some point, potentially, sparingly? Or do you realize that, yeah, it's kind of a potentially a new normal just because of all of the eyes everywhere? People will find you if you're a high-level talent, and if you're a kid, you want to go get to the league, and the home state school's not been sending too many to the league. Now we'll see if that can't get turned around under Scott Frost. So a guy that is all about pro ball and is back in college is Fred Hoiberg, Elijah. And you know what? Good for Nebraska. They got to sleep in their own beds. They got to have a day off yesterday. They got to work out a little bit today. And here's a little bit of Coach Hoiberg from today. We'll start off with how the mayor is keeping the team fresh at practice as they get ready for Purdue.
Generally, the second day after an extended trip is the one where you're more tired. And yesterday, you kind of go on adrenaline after that first day back home. And then the second day, that's when it hits you. So we got them up. We got a really good sweat early in practice. But when we put our scout in and the game plan in, generally when we go live and get them up and down a little bit more, we just weren't able to do that because of a couple little things. Not that any of them have to sit out tomorrow, but literally 3 straight plays, I had guys limp off the court. So, we just made the decision to put the game plan, walk through it, and we'll get an opportunity to get a sweat tomorrow at noon before the 4:30 tip, and hopefully have our legs. That's going to be as important as any in this stretch that we're going to have coming up, is to try to keep them as fresh as possible.
Elijah, that's brutal news. That guys, you have 7 games, 12 days. This is the 7th. And you got guys that are, it looks like, just fatigued, and then you're starting to pull stuff. And, man, it's not a good look for the league, quite honestly.
I mean, no, it's. I understand that it's what the Big Ten has to do here, but whenever they say all these things about health and safety for football, and we've talked about it before, this doesn't seem like it's promoting health and safety among the men's basketball team at Nebraska. And then they say, no Big Ten tournament for baseball, no non-conference play, promoting health and safety. But then, no, Nebraska, you got to go play a back-to-back against Maryland. And that's probably better than, having to force in 4 games with cross-country road trips and whatnot in 1 week. Mm-hmm. But still, you shouldn't have to play 4 games in 1 week in college basketball.
It's about a paycheck with your different tier levels with basketball, and that's it. And Coach Hoiberg's been asked a lot about this Michigan and Nebraska dynamic, and is Michigan going to have to do and go through what Nebraska went through, and Michigan's makeup is going to be 11 games in 22 days allegedly. Listen, they're not going to make Michigan do that. They're going to look at Nebraska and say, yeah, it's not been good on Nebraska. We're not going to do that to our 1 seed. Specifically, if you get an Ohio State win on Sunday against Michigan, the Wolverines still have opportunity to stay on that 1 line, but it's a really good battle Sunday. But you don't want to do a disservice to your 1 seed, but you can't really just be blatantly treating your last place team in league action like a redheaded stepchild, and the Big Ten's completely doing that.
But on the flip side of things, you also have Nebraska. I mean, they need games right now. Fred Hoiberg said it before. He'll say it again, I'm sure, is that nothing is going to be better for this team than to get more games in and get more time playing together. Obviously, you'd like to have practice time in between there, but I think if you gave Fred Hoiberg the option of fit in all these games in a month or don't play these games at all. I think he'd rather play the games because I think he knows how important it is for the development. It's the same as the football team with Scott Frost. Scott Frost wanted to play as many games as he could this year because he knows his team needed it for the development aspect of things. And I think Fred Hoiberg's team needs it too. And we've seen it in the past couple games, just seeing how this team looks better than they did at the start of conference play.
Hoiberg's right on the money, and you're going to get better by playing. What this team's got to have, and you hit on it, is the ability to practice, correct, and get better with practice time, and then apply that to game time. So let's hear a little bit more on that development phase. And Eduardo Andres, super intriguing, long and lanky and athletic, and he's shown some flashes. Here's more from the mayor on Eduardo and where he's going with his game getting better each day.
Well, I'm really proud of Eduardo, for working on his game and spending a lot of extra time in the gym, working on his finishes, working on his conditioning. Eduardo's got a chance with his physical tools to be special, and I've said that since we got him. And, rim protection, we haven't had that, in the 2 years that we're coming up on. But Eduardo has had some really good blocks at the rim, and, plays that would have been 2 points or 3 on an and one are now, we've got that guy back there, so we can get extended a little bit more as we move on with Eduardo into the future, and he'll play more and more as we go down the stretch run. And I've been really pleased with his development and proud of how he's continued to work.
We're going to snake in more from the mayor here. Rim protection's great by Eduardo on the defensive side. Where's Nebraska at with a chance to practice when it comes to finishing at the rim? Here's the mayor.
It's continuing to get in the gym, which those two guys, both Ivan and Eduardo, do a good job. And a lot of it is where they are based on their development in their basketball lives. And both those two guys started playing basketball later than most of the guys on our roster. Eduardo, he's still new to this game, but I think you see the feel. I think he's going to develop into a nice shooter. He's got a nice high release point. You saw, I think, Penn State or in one of those games, he stepped up and knocked down 2 free throws with no hesitation. And, I think he's going to have a chance to be a very good shooter because of his mechanics. But, again, as you talked about, Sam, the repetition with the players, especially the ones that didn't grow up with this game. Eduardo grew up playing a lot of soccer, and I think that's why he's got great feet. But, he's got a chance to be a really good one because, again, of his athleticism. You can't teach a 7'7", almost 7'5" wingspan. And then, the way that he is coming along with his skill set.
You know what? Get me a guy with a monster wingspan. Get me a guy that's played soccer at that size and that height. Get me a dude with that agility and ability to be agile on his feet. And will no doubt put the work in to get better. We're winding down this first hour, Hail Varsity Radio, Friday edition. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and we'll spend some time with Bill Doleman coming up, Doug Duda on the way. Find us on email, chris@hailvarsity.com. Follow us on Twitter @Schmidt_radio, @Herbal We'll wrap up hour one next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We will talk with Bill Doleman. To remind you, the Pride of Fairbury is coming up, NBC Sports. And we'll have some discussion points here from Coach Hoiberg on how fair is it for Nebraska versus Michigan with this schedule that's been put on the Big Red due to the COVID shutdown. And also, what is going to be asked of Michigan, your top team in the league, and your 1 seed. Let's get you a quick reminder about your friends at West Blue Realty real quick. And they not only take their time, they find that residential home in Lincoln or surrounding community you want, but they can also save you some money. For a limited time, you mentioned Hail Varsity, and West Blue Realty can provide you up to $1,000 on the closing of your next home purchase. Tom Luby, Kelly Hofschneider, they are phenomenal. Give Tom a ring at 402-540-3768. Kelly Hofschneider. You can give Kelly a shout as well at 402-202-2312. It pays to work with West Blue, westbluerealty.com, and get an appointment today. Go see Tom. Go see Kelly at 1120 K Street, Suite 200. So let's hear from Coach Hoiberg. Elijah, do we have the Jawan discussion point queued up?
Yes, we do.
All right, let's hear him.
And listen, I have the utmost respect for Jawan Howard. I always have. He's a guy that I know. I tried to hire him when I was in Chicago when I got the Bulls job, and I admired him as a player. He's doing obviously unbelievable things at Michigan, but I said it the other night after the game. Our programs are in two completely different places right now. We're in a beginning stages of a rebuild, and he's right now a team that's going to compete for a championship. So for us, these games are all very meaningful for the development of our players. You've seen what it's done for Eduardo, to get more action and more games. So to me, the more games we can play, the better it's going to be. Now, the one thing I don't want is for it to affect long-term health. And, we talk to our training staff and our medical staff about that and try to make sure that the guys, make it through these last however many games we're going to play, on what the Big Ten gives us. But it's important for us to get games where our guys can continue to develop and get opportunity. The other thing, I can't say I blame what they're trying to do over there, and the last thing I'd say is, for me, I'm going to talk about what's best for our program. And, I would hope all the other coaches would do the same thing.
No, you got to pump your program, and there's a fine line of experience. There's a fine line of getting better, the young guys, or just gelling. You've seen Nebraska get better. It's not always come in wins, but I think you feel better about where the basketball program's at. But you can't go on a death march to do it, and it feels like Nebraska's been on one, hence the first commentary by Fred about just guys, kind of pulling up lane. So, I don't know. We'll see where things shake out against Purdue. We'll have a good time with the Pride of Fairbury. Bill Doleman. When we come back, Hour 2 at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back with you, Tower 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Without further ado, we welcome in the Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports. You hear and watch him on the Olympic Channel with NBC, and the backyard still looks like we could be doing some moguls on it. We say hi to Bill Doleman, at Bill Doleman on Twitter. Billy D, how's your Friday? What do you know?
Well, I hate to tell the people back home in God's country that it's probably in the mid-40s here with bright sunshine, and any snow that we got over the last couple of days is pretty much long gone unless you have a house that faces toward the north, because that snow sticks around for about 6-7 weeks. But nevertheless, it is a glorious day out here, and I know that everybody back home has had a few challenges, except for you, of course, having it been your birthday this week. So I trust you had a good time at the playground at Richmond and Gordman, and pizza at Shakey's, and maybe around a golf at Coolcrest.
That's a good question. I thought about, some form or fashion of Shakey's, but not that.
That's downtown, or at least it was.
Well, the thing is it's just weird. It's just awkward when you go in and it's her shift, So. Back then, it was a nice surprise for her.
Yeah,
but now
right.
It's just I'm stalking her again. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I had a good birthday. We went and had a filet, a little baked potato, a beer, and I was in bed by 8:30 because I'm old now, Doleman.
That happens. It happens to all of us.
But it's the best thing in the world where you can just go crash. I want to get into some recruiting thoughts because it's your favorite topic, Billy D. But just the reality of the in-state talent in Nebraska continuing to rise up and attract outside attention, and the fact Nebraska is not guaranteed anymore to keep home state kids home. Do you think that will eventually be accepted? Do you think Nebraska can reverse course? How do you look at that? And the reason I bring it up is because you've got a number of high-level kids, and these kids are doing work with, for example, Steve Warren, who you know well, and they're really talented, and that means Iowa State is playing good football and recruiting them. That means Iowa. That means Miami. That means Notre Dame. I mean, go through the list, right? How does Nebraska counter the issue that is a reality in 2021, getting rated in your home state?
Well, I think the bottom line goes back to, you've got to win. And, back in the day, once it was established that the Nebraska players were not just important to the program, but were producing within the program. If you got a shot to play, and if you earned your shot to play, you were going to get to play. And it wasn't something as though anything was promised to anybody else. But if you were a walk-on kid or a coveted kid, whatever the case might be, however you want to view it, back for 30-plus years, it was people in Nebraska knew that you were going to get a chance to play, and that by playing at Nebraska, what you were doing was kind of important, not only for the state culture, but for your hometown. February hasn't exactly had a number of guys who have played, for the Huskers over the years, but I think most people would remember who had a chance to play. Russ Vanas, I think, was a backup punter for a couple of years. Mitch Grummert came from Fairbury and played. You remember those guys who left home and went to Lincoln and got to play for the Huskers. And until you can reestablish how important that is with the winning, it's probably going to be a battle to keep kids in state. We used to go raid the best players out of Missouri. We raided the best players out of Iowa. We raided all of the surrounding states for their best talent. And yeah, because Nebraska has slipped a little bit in terms of the wins and losses, and maybe it's not quite as perceived as important in hometowns around the state. It might be an uphill battle. I still think you're going to get, the vast majority of guys who want to play Nebraska are going to go to Nebraska. But you're always going to have, there's always that culture of kids in Omaha that you might have to fight for. And, back in the day was you could name the ones that would leave, the Sean Ridleys. That was a big deal that he went to Iowa. Larry Station went to Iowa. Sometimes they were slipping away. But, the talent in Nebraska is pretty good. And you have places like the Warren Academy that are making players even better. There's certainly much more, it's tougher to hide players these days because kids can go find their, get their own website and put their own product on there and let the coaches know where they are. So Nebraska is doing the same thing, though. Finding players wherever they can and finding those who are interested, who have a tie and want to get an opportunity to build a program.
Bill, this is a Husker talk show, but I kind of want to get your opinion on the University of Colorado and their ability to recruit in-state just as a barometer. Are they able to lock down a 500-mile radius around Boulder, or is that something that Nebraska works harder on than other schools in the country?
Well, I think Nebraska works on it harder, but I'm just telling you, and I don't say this as a guy who bleeds scarlet and cream. There is no interest in Colorado football here. I'm just telling you that. I always go back to the Mike McIntyre year when they were about 9-0 going into October. And prior to them getting into October, nobody was talking about them. There was little talk about them, granted the year that we've had was disjointed, But Carl Durrell had a decent first season after, the guy jumped ship and went to Michigan State. But you don't notice anything about Colorado football. So is it easy to come to Colorado and take out Brian Borboom and Tahan Lewis and McCaffrey who left, and J.J. Doleman or JoJo Doleman? You can go back over the years, and Nebraska's done reasonably well. But I'm just telling you, there is not a huge interest in Colorado football within the city of Denver where the talent would be. I've said this many times. There's more. You hear more about Colorado State for some reason, and I don't know why that is. But you hear more about Colorado State football in the Denver area than you do about the Buffs. Maybe it's because the Broncos overshadow everything. And right now, the biggest topic of conversation is Deshaun Watson, right? But nobody talks Colorado football until about October, and then they gauge where they are. And if they're having a decent season, you might hear a little bit more about them. So if you're a great Denver high school football player, you grow up knowing not much about Colorado football, right? And that's just the way it is, and it's really kind of a strange thing, but. I think a lot of places that have urban schools, metropolitan schools like UCLA and USC and even Miami and some of those, you're fighting to be in the headlines. And Colorado, I think that fights that battle probably more than anybody, and I don't think they ever win it. I don't think they'll ever win it.
Bill Doleman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, and at Bill Doleman on Twitter. Bill, going to switch gears to Nebraska basketball. It's been a really grueling stretch for Nebraska. They get a day of rest. They get a day of practice. They get Purdue tomorrow. What's been your takeaway with Nebraska's stretch here? I know they only had one win, could have won two, but what have you seen from Hoiberg's crew here as this week's continued?
I think that Nebraska would be really solid if games were 30 to 35 minutes long. It seems like you watch them and they're close, and then there's that 4-minute scoring drought, or 2-minute scoring drought that turns into 4, that turns into 6, and a game that is 2 points and stuck in the 40s midway through the second half is all of a sudden 61-44, and you're like, what the hell just happened? I think it's pretty tough to judge them at this stage of this season, given what they went through with the lengthy pause, and then what they've been told to do. I still think the Big Ten's trying to get them back for the whole football thing in August. I can't recall.
Are you serious, or are you just giving a great one-liner there?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm watching this going, we're going to have you guys play every other day and travel and then play back-to-back days, then come back home, have a day off, then play again. I find what they've had to go through as uniquely challenging as maybe anything I've seen in 35 years in the sports business. But they play hard. I'll give them that. They don't look incredibly organized offensively. They cast up way too many threes, pass up too many twos. There was a game the other day that I was watching, and there was a wide open 8-foot jumper in the lane, and the first thought is, what wing do I pass to? And not shooting at the open rim. But that's symptomatic of college basketball in general. It's you pass up the 2 to shoot the 3. Whether you make the 3 or not, that doesn't matter. The fact is that's what you're looking to do. And that's one of the hard things about watching basketball anymore is the emphasis on the 3-pointer and passing up the 2-pointer, which maybe not even practiced anymore. But I just really think it's hard to judge what this team is who this team is with what it's been asked to do. Here's what I think. I think they're going to go on a roll. They're going to go play in the Big Ten tournament, which is in Indianapolis. The entire NCAA tournament is being played in Indianapolis. So I just think Nebraska is going to get on a roll, win the tournament, get an automatic bid, and they're going to be in Indy and save some travel money. There you go.
Bill Doleman with the
Chris, do we still have you? Oh,
optimism.
Chris, we lost
optimism.
Chris, we lost you for a second there.
Better now?
Yes, you're back now.
Yeah, this thing's going to set the kitchen island on fire. Doleman, remember the old tie line?
Oh, yeah. I'm working with one of those doing my
alive.
NBC shows right now.
Okay, cool. So I got to ask about Watson and Denver. Does that happen? And what's your take on Wentz and Indy?
Well, I think at this point it's been sold so much over the last week that the Broncos need to be careful that doesn't happen. Elway moved on to another position with the organization. They've got their new general manager. And I think that they've cleared space cap-wise. Carolina, I think, cleared like $19 million in cap space today. I would imagine the Texans are going to acquiesce at some point and say, okay, go ahead, we're going to make a trade for you, and it's going to come down to Carolina or it's going to come down to Denver. People have said that Watson doesn't want to be here because of the weather, but somebody needs to tell him that there's more sunshine here than anywhere else other than Australia. But the problem I think the Broncos have is if they don't get him, they have sold it so much with the new GM that if they don't, it's going to be a disappointment, and they're going to be stuck with Drew Lock, who 2 years ago was, an exciting young player because of his personality, but nobody's excited about him because of his performance. So you can have the guy that likes to, bebop his head on the sidelines listening to hip hop, which is cool and it's fun, but when he goes on the sidelines and throws a bunch of pick sixes like, Jameis Winston, and it's like, why are we playing this guy? So I think Denver's got a real problem on their hands if they don't land Deshaun Watson, and I would put Von Miller in a deal and a few other players and send him down there because J.J. Watt is gone, and I think Miller needs a fresh break too. So I think Denver's got to make that deal, whatever it takes. And Carson Wentz to Indy, I think he needed a fresh start. It's a little bit like Deshaun Watson getting out of Houston. There's a new coach in Indianapolis. The coach doesn't seem to be right for the job, at least at this point. It's a new system. It's everything new. Jalen Hurts comes in and does well, and I just think Wentz's time in Philadelphia had come to an end, and he gets to go play for Frank Reich, whom he loves. He's going back, fairly close to home, and he's going to a team that's got a really good offensive line. It's got a great ground game, so they don't rely on Wentz as much. He's got, at least one decent receiver, and they've got a good vibe going on there. And so a fresh start for him might be exactly what he needs. And if it doesn't work out for him there, he's going to be a long-term backup. I think that's where it is. But I think for every party involved, that deal needed to be made, and right now everybody wins.
Bill Doleman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Billy D, last thought here, about 90 seconds. What is your weekend broadcast schedule like? When can folks hear and see you on the NBC family of networks?
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. The buzz in this country has to be what's going on at the World Biathlon Championships in Pokljuka, Slovenia. The world's greatest sport, exhaustion, mental fatigue, rifles, men's and women's mixed relays, all kinds of action. We're wrapping that up this weekend, and then the World Nordic Championships, cross-country skiing, Nordic combined, all the great sports that make Nebraska special is now being introduced to the rest of the world over the next 10 days in Slovenia and in Germany. So that's all kinds of winter wonderland of sports on the networks of NBC.
Do they still do the skeleton? Remember that thing?
Oh, yeah. They head first going 90 miles an hour on a sled. Yeah, exactly. They got that thing going on. One of the first things that NBC called me, and NBC called me like 3 years ago, and they're saying, hey, look, we need somebody to call ski jumping. Could you do ski jumping? And I said, I'm from Nebraska. Of course I can do ski jumping. And the rest is history.
I love it. Find Bill on Twitter at Bill Doleman, Pride of Fairbury. And, Bill, it was great to get caught up. Thank you for the birthday wishes this week. We will get out to Donkeyland at some point and find a brewery, all right?
There's plenty of those out here, too.
Notice I said brewery. All right. There we go. Bill, thanks, brother.
Go Big Red.
There he is, Bill Doleman. We will check in with Doug Duda. State wrestling, some hoops. Our Friday edition continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down a Friday, it's Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. You hear him on Doug and Daddy on ESPN Superstation in central Nebraska. Proud affiliate with Hail Varsity. And We are excited to be on out in Kearney Hastings, Grand Island, 1460, 1550, and, of course, their new FM signals, 92.1 in Kearney, 92.7 in Hastings. We welcome in Doug Duda. Mr. Doug, I got to get the lowdown from you, man. Thanks for the time. Take us through your week in Omaha at State Wrestling. You're a Hall of Fame broadcaster. You are Mr. Wrestling. And what are some impressions you had this week of covering, a sport Nebraska kids really love and Nebraskans really love checking in on?
Well, Schmidt, it's great to talk with you. I just want to say thanks for the Valentine's teddy bear that you sent me. That was awful sweet. And when you're sitting in here at the CHI Health Center, I tell everybody it's like being in Vegas. You don't know what's going on outside. You don't know what time of day it is. You don't know what the temperature is. You're in here from sun up to sundown, but you get to watch some great high school sports, and it's just kind of it's the beginning. We've got state wrestling this week, then the swimming and diving next week, and then you got girls state basketball and boys state basketball, all the championships kind of starting here today.
This is an event you have covered and know well, and I know it's been broken up. How has that gone for the kids versus it being kind of all slammed together? It's been, and it worked well, but with COVID, it's been spread out over several days. How has that dynamic been for you and also for the wrestlers?
Yeah, it spreads it out. Classes A and D wrestled Wednesday and Thursday, and classes B and C are going today. And for the first round, they did their own. So, Wednesday morning, A started at 9 a.m. They wrestled through about 3-4 rounds, got done about 1:30ish, 2 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock they took it on to D. The only thing, Schmitty, is atmosphere. Class A at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday. We don't have to make any jokes. You kind of know what that's like. People are busy. People are going to school. It wasn't that much atmosphere. Class B came in last night. It's a chance for everybody to get back to the big city. There's a lot of these folks that haven't been able and haven't traveled much because of all of this, and a chance to come support the community, watch their kids and family members or just their classmates, because it has opened up. It's not family only. You can find a way to get in here. And the buzz is a little different because you're used to having all 4 classes going at the same time for 3 days. But we did have a very successful state finals last night with A and D, and expect that there will be a successful finals tomorrow. And today, B and C, probably as far as putting them together versus A&D, we've got more fans, but it's still spread out. It's not packed in here, but there's enough that when something's going on. There's always that roar. It's not like the Masters, but it's kind of you can compare it to that a little bit. When something happens, we've got 6 mats instead of 10, but if something happens, everybody starts looking to see what just happened, what happened, who did what.
Doug Duda is with us on Hail Varsity Radio, host of Doug and Daddy, 1460, 1550, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island. Doug, who are some of the kids you followed from your region, and who are some kids that caught your eye with state this week?
Well, we're still early in B and C, and Millard South is just loaded. I mean, we can go with Omaha Scott, and you can say what you want about kids getting where they need to be. When you're in wrestling clubs and you want to bring everybody to where you're at, it was Omaha Scott for a long time, and now it's Millard South. And Millard South is a top 20 national program, and they ran away and hid with it. Now, they said openly since districts that they wanted to go out and break Grand Island's record of the most points ever scored in a state tournament. Now, they fell short of that, but they still had multiple champions. And we talked about this on a couple of our broadcasts the last couple of days. There are more Nebraska high school wrestlers going to Division I than ever before, and I think that says something. And it's not just Nebraska. We've got Oregon State, North Carolina State, Virginia, a lot of kids going to D2 schools, North Dakota State, and on and on. There's just way more than there's ever been from the sport of wrestling going on to bigger-time college wrestling.
Well, and Coach Manning and what Nebraska wrestling does is phenomenal, and that is outstanding. Doug, going to switch gears to Nebraska and hit on the topic of recruiting. It's kind of been an ongoing theme, and we touched on, we're not expecting the top 2 kids in the Metro to put Nebraska in their top 5. I look back at Hoiberg and his talent level in Kearney, and the Division I schools that knew about him, and Nebraska was still able to get him. A thought from you on kids in central and western Nebraska. What does that Nebraska impact or that Nebraska offer mean? Does it matter to kids in central and western Nebraska more, less, or the same as maybe some kids in the eastern part of the state that's a little closer to the program? Bottom line is Nebraska needs to win and be better, yes, for the next realm of 15 to 18-year-olds. They got to take care of that Monday through Saturday. But just from an impression and a brand standpoint, what's the weight of it right now?
Schmidt, I think there's two things. First, and we've talked about it before, the length of time that Nebraska has been overly successful. Not relevant, I hear that term a lot, what Nebraska has done with Scott Frost and Mike Riley over the last 6-7 years when these high school kids that are juniors were 10, 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And whatever, never thinking about playing college ball probably at that point. So a lot of these kids want to root for somebody that's successful, NFL, pros, college, what doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, whatever it is. So that's one side of it. But I think when you get outside of the bigger cities, the things that you can do in smaller town Nebraska it's even more evident that, boy, I grew up watching Nebraska football. I don't care what's happening. Harvest time, I'm going to make sure that if I'm in my combine, I'm listening to the game, or if I'm not doing that, I'm watching the game. And it's just that Friday night lights is a little bit different in western Nebraska, and you're not going to have as many Division I offers, but you have to have the Terry Keneally's, the Corey Schlesingers. You've got to have some of those small-town kids, and I mean small-town kids that can help contribute to this Nebraska program. And I still think that if a small-town kid gets anything, any kind of a sniff from Nebraska, that's really going to fire him up. It's different in the metro, in Lincoln now, because they have more options. You have more social media. You got more camps you can go to. It's just different in the recruiting cycle right now. So, yes, in central and western Nebraska, I think the Nebraska brand, I think that's kind of what you're asking. The Nebraska brand still holds the biggest footprint.
Doug Duda is with us. He is at State Wrestling, and we are talking a little Husker football on the recruiting trail. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Friday edition. You hear Doug on Doug and Daddy, ESPN 1460, 1550, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island, FM in 92.1 and 92.7. Also in central Nebraska, the Superstation. We are so proud to be on central Nebraska's Superstation here with Hail Varsity, proud affiliate. And Doug, let's quickly kind of switch gears, and I want to get your take on Husker hoops. Do you think they're better, or does it matter because they're not winning?
They're better.
It just sounds like somebody spilled your beer. You and I are having a cocktail, and someone just committed the party foul. That long pause, Duda.
Schmidt, because I almost feel like we have to talk Nebraska basketball. I'm probably one of those poor schmucks that actually love Nebraska. I mean, I love Nebraska football, number one. But I loved Nebraska basketball when I was in high school, when I was going to college in Lincoln, when Danny Nee and the boys were turning things around. It was cool just to go to the NIT back then. You were just trying to be successful in basketball. But, Schmitty, here's the deal. I don't understand why Nebraska seems to be the only team. Some teams it happens to once in a while, but every single game, it's a 13-0 run. It's a 20-0 run. It's an 18-2 run. And, Schmitty, it's been every game, and it's not just Fred Hoiberg. It wasn't just Doc Sadler. It wasn't just Barry Cole. This has been going on for 15 years, that Nebraska continually has had games. I don't understand how that can't be. I mean, it's all the time, and that's why you hear the frustration in my voice. I think they're better, but how in the world can it happen every single night? Pick out any other college in the country, let alone a Power 5 team, and find me a stretch of games of 5 in a row where any of those teams have went on double-digit droughts 5 straight nights. I bet you can't do it. Nebraska does it every single night.
God, give him a hug, Elijah.
Yeah, Doug, I mean,
oh my God,
I can't,
love it.
I can't give you a hug virtually, but it's COVID times. COVID times, you know. But when you talk about these scoring droughts, how much do you think of that is just a symptom of the way offense has gone in modern basketball, just to prioritize the layup and the three?
Elijah, I don't disagree with you, but it's only Nebraska. It's only Nebraska. I mean, again, if you can find me, because you're better at finding all the stats and looking all this stuff up than me or Schmidt ever is, you just find me another team. I know people are frustrated watching Nebraska from the offensive standpoint because it looks like all they're doing is throwing up threes and running into the middle of the lane and losing the basketball. And I know that gets frustrating, but we're not that bad. Why do we always got to go on these droughts?
Doug Duda is with us on Hail Varsity Radio at State Wrestling. We've hit hoops, we've hit football. So, last thought, Mr. Doug. Let's talk Isaac Trout. He's in Lincoln tonight against Pius and went for almost 60 the other night. I have not had a chance to see him in person. What are we dealing with? I mean, you've seen a lot of high school basketball, brother. I mean, you did the Andy Markowski era, and he was really good and is good. So we love the pride of Ord. But we got Trout, and he is another national attention-getting kid. What do you like most about his game?
How cool is it that we have all these Division I basketball players in Nebraska? That's cool. Trout, he's one of those kids that when he was young, he just wasn't all that tall, and he learned how to handle the basketball, and then he grew. And he grew substantially. So you've got one of these 6'8", 6'9" kids that not only can shoot and handle the basketball, but now has got some height under him, and he can play a little defense. They're still probably a year away in Grand Island. His supporting cast isn't what you would want for some of the other Metro teams, but and Pius is good. Boy, I wouldn't want to play them in the state tournament. I get it that it's Millard North and Bellevue West because they're great, but you could see a good one tonight. It's just a little easy for some teams. They can let him score his 30, but if they want to go play defense on him, it really kind of handcuffs Grand Island about the rest of their offense, because right now, as well as they play together, Trout's still 75% of their offense.
Doug Duda. Doug, thanks for your coverage. Appreciate you much. We'll do this again soon, and have a great weekend, buddy.
You too, Schmitty. We should be playing baseball like the rest of the country. Love you.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Good stuff from Doug Duda and Bill Doleman this hour. Derek Peterson, last hour podcast. Get us with Hail Varsity Radio every day, Monday through Saturday. And you can find us HurrdatMedia.com, also HailVarsity.com, and ESPNLincoln.com for the on-demand. And give us a rating. Tell us what you think. You love, you hate, or you're somewhere in between. It's okay. Just sound off. Give us a review, give us a rating, and give us not only a follow, but a download subscription. And don't cost you nothing. iTunes, Spotify, Google Play for Hail Varsity, and, of course, ESPN Lincoln on Twitter, and Hail Varsity on Twitter, and Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence on Twitter, at Schmidt_radio. Follow all of those. So you heard the rejoin there with a little bit of Walter White voice. Elijah, we're watching Your Honor on Showtime. That's the new Bryan Cranston series where his kid ends up whacking a mob boss's kid in a traffic accident, and we're almost through this first season. And it feels a little Breaking Bad-ish, but man, it's still pretty good. It's pretty dark, but it's all right. I have not recommended very many like binge-worthy programs, but I'm giving this the head nod and take a sip of your beer bottle. I like it.
It's got the Chris Schmidt stand.
Well, it's not a kick. out of type show, but it's a good series.
I mean, if it has the Chris Schmidt stamp of approval, I'm all for it. And you are calling it binge-worthy?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a Showtime deal. I think we are dirtying it through Amazon Prime. And it's one my wife's even watching, so we have not watched together. So we're kind of in this arms race of who's ahead of the other episode-wise. It didn't get a bunch of great reviews, and it maybe feels too familiar with Bryan Cranston's character. He's a judge versus being a science teacher. There's no meth involved here, but it gets pretty deep. So check that out.
That's going to go on my list. The next one, I got to get through Sopranos still. Still haven't seen it.
So what's it all? Any of them? Or are you on a certain season, or have you not even started?
I have not even started.
Dude, you'll love The Sopranos.
Okay.
And you know what sucks, though, is the further we get away from it. I mean, we're working on 14 years since the finale. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been 21 years since that show started in the late 99. Yeah, so it's great.
I was
it's
pushing
awesome
to watch episode 1 last night with my roommates, and I got outvoted.
What'd they vote on?
They decided that they just wanted to watch Jojo Rabbit instead, which was a good movie.
Okay. Let's get into a forecast here. We'll do some rapid fire. So tomorrow is a trio of Big Ten action. You have Michigan State at Indiana. Indiana's clinging to a 10 seed right now. They're favored by 6.5. You know what? I think Indiana wins, but I think Michigan State covers. Give me 67-62. IU. Michigan State will stun somebody. Maybe they'll get ready for the tournament, Big Ten tournament, but I like Indiana to keep rolling right now.
Yeah, from what I saw from that Nebraska-Michigan State game earlier this year, Michigan State, a lot of young talent, which makes me think that, as you said, they're going to get somebody. They're going to get it all clicking at some point. I think Indiana could be the team to do it. I personally don't know enough about this Indiana basketball team to know if it's going to be or not. So I'm going to stick with Vegas. I'm going to stick with the line. I'm going to call it 70-63. Indiana covers barely.
Two things that are common in the Big Ten right now. Penn State is dangerous. They fell by 10, and Ohio State was able to get a really impressive win. I think that's how good Ohio State is, but it was nip and tuck. So Penn State's dangerous. Illinois is not playing good basketball, almost beaten by Nebraska, barely outlasted Northwestern. They get drilled. And when I mean drilled, they get beat at Minnesota tomorrow. Illinois minus 5.5. Give me Minnesota for the outright win. Give me Minnesota for sure in the points. I like the Gophers tomorrow.
I would be with you if there were fans in the stands up in Minnesota. That's a tough place to go get a win, but there aren't. So I see this as a get-right game for Illinois. Give me... I'll take Illinois in the points.
You'll give the points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska's dogged at home, minus 6.5. Does Nebraska get another win? I don't know, man. They had their moments to beat Maryland. I think Maryland's got elite talent. When they want to give a damn, they're pretty good. I think Purdue's hovering right there around a top 25 ranking. They're 14 and 8. I just think Purdue's got too much. I think Nebraska probably covers, but they lose by 5 or so at home. Give me Purdue 70, Nebraska 65. Purdue the win, Nebraska the cover. Elijah?
This is one of those games where I just don't see how Nebraska is going to match up in the post with Purdue. They got a really talented freshman 7-footer who is getting better and better as the year goes on. I just don't see who's going to be able to box him out and be able to keep him off the glass. And I've also found that the more pessimistic I am towards Nebraska basketball, the better they seem to play. So I'm going to have Nebraska losing in a blowout. Nebraska 52, Purdue 70. So an 18-point win for Purdue.
Okay. We'll head to Sunday. Iowa drilled Wisconsin last night. Big time win for Iowa. They host Penn State. Don't have a line on that. I think Iowa wins at home, but I think Penn State makes it interesting. Give me the Hawkeyes by about 8 or 10. Does that sound right to you?
Are we trying to set a fake line here?
No, that's the line I would throw out there, 8 to 10 points.
If that is the line you're throwing out there, I got to go with Iowa to cover. I see this as a 10 to 15 point Iowa win. not Penn State's year necessarily. They're not the team they had a couple years ago, whereas Iowa still got Luka Garza, and they're reaching that stretch of the season where you think you're going to start picking things up for the Big Ten tournament. They got a big win last night. Give me Iowa by 14 points. I don't have a score for you, but Iowa by about 14 against Penn State.
Maryland at Rutgers. This is huge. Maryland's working towards the right side of the bubble. Rutgers is currently on the right side of the bubble. Maryland kind of maybe got right against Nebraska with their outside shooting. I think Rutgers is too good at home. And I think Rutgers wins this over Maryland by about 7. Give me a 74-68 type deal. Give me Rutgers and the win at home over Maryland.
It's so tough for me to say home court advantage in 2021 when there's no fans there. So this one's just a toss-up for me between Maryland and Rutgers. But I'll take Maryland, and I'll take Maryland close. Give me Maryland 74, Rutgers 71.
Ohio State hosting Michigan. I think Ohio State's the best team in the league. I think they show that against Michigan. They can bully ball you. They are okay at three-point shooting. Not great, but they defend better than anybody. Give me Ohio State over Michigan. And I think it's one of those classic grinder outs, 67-60, Ohio State over Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan putting up a better battle in basketball than they do in football, but Ohio State just has an awesome record against teams in the top 25 this year. This is number 3 versus number 4, I believe, in the AP poll. So it's going to be a great game. I'll be tuning in, as you said, 2 1 seeds. But I'm with you. I'm going to take Ohio State. I think they're the best team in the conference.
We'll wind down a Friday at Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on your Friday. Don't forget Weekend Edition tomorrow morning. Myself, Mark Cranack, Elijah Herbel. So we will get it rolling this weekend. So reminder, basketball tonight, ESPN Lincoln locally. Norris, number 2 in Class B. Wahoo, number 4 in Class C. And that's going to be one awesome ball game with tempo and shooting and athletes. And we'll have pregame for you around 7:20. And then I'll have Papio and Southwest tomorrow around 5 o'clock. So we are gearing up towards girls state. We are gearing up towards boys state. And you got some really phenomenal programs here for girls basketball. East has always been pretty talented. Of course, Southwest is big time. And same with Pius as they're trying to go back-to-back. Around the capital city for boys, you know, we just touched on how good Norris is. North Star, not that far removed from taking down Omaha Central. East has been a lot of fun, and same with Southeast and Lincoln High. And you do have Pius that is just incredible with what Coach Spitzka and company have done yet again this year. They are a very big-time threat. And you know, Southwest is playing really good basketball with Coach Baugh. So we'll have a chance tomorrow to check them out, chance to see Norris and Wahoo, both teams that'll no doubt make their reservations in the capital city for state here in a couple of weeks. Good time of year, man. Great time for basketball. Elijah, thank the good Lord, it's going to thaw out here over the weekend a little bit.
Yeah, I'm already planning a car wash come Monday. I just know it's just going to be brutal roads. My car is going to be covered in like all the leftover, the salt that's been left all over the roads, and it's just going to look gross. But
think about all the just gunk on the bottom of your vehicle, right?
But on the bright side, if the snow gets melted out a little bit, I'm going to go hit the backyard, get a suntan. It's we're only 3-4 months from summer.
Yeah, we are. That's
it's a little bold, I know.
That's optimism.
Well, what I'm looking forward to is I'm looking forward to that weather. I mean, if we hit mid to high 40s at any point in the next month, I mean, once the snow melts off, that's good enough for basketball weather for me. I've been missing going and playing some basketball.
I'm sure you have. Well, think about this, too. I mean, it warmed up to the point this week where 19 above felt like 40. It just felt crazy weird outside because it wasn't 20 below.
And then, like,
it's all relative,
and like,
for sure.
Also, like, you see like 15 and you go like, oh, I'm going to bundle up just the same as I've been all week because it's still cold, and you go outside and you're like, oh, I'm completely overdressed. Maybe I'm just warm-blooded and have a little more insulation than most people. I don't know.
No, you're not like you were. It's all good. Check out the podcast. Do so, Hail Varsity Radio, and find us on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Play. And be sure to check us out here in about an hour and a half for boys basketball, Norris and Wahoo. And stream at ESPNLincoln.com locally. Talk to you in the morning. Weekend edition at 7 a.m. Thanks to Elijah Herbel, Doug Duda. Big thanks to Bill Doleman and Derek Peterson. And back tomorrow at 7 on Hail Varsity. See ya.